Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to route juice grooves, handles, and make flawless round over edges. Now, I just want to say up front as an encouragement to some of y'all out there who have small shops like me, this is actually an 8x12 mini barn. You can see it's jam-packed full of stuff. So there's a workbench along the side, workbench in the back, and it's kind of one of those deals you got to wait for a nice sunny day and when it's not raining, and then pull half of your tools out in the yard here so that you can work and do all the things that you need to do. So it's kind of not ideal, but something I deal with and can easily be dealt with by anyone on a smaller budget. But anyway, let's get started here. The first thing we're going to do is joint these pieces of wood, square up an edge so that we can, or square up two edges, the edge and the face, so that we can run them on the table saw and the planer and have a nice square piece to glue up. I'm not going into a lot of detail here on how to mill this lumber, but if you don't have the machinery to do this, most lumber stores that you buy your lumber at have the option to mill the lumber for you. First things first, the table saw is unplugged, so you don't have to send me any mean comments about table saw safety. It's not about to turn on and cut me. But this is the blade I'm going to be using for this cutting board. It's the Freud Next Generation saw blade. I do all of my cuts on the table saw. I don't have a chop saw at this point, so it's a general purpose blade, which is really good for ripping and cross cutting. It's 10 inches in diameter. It has 40 teeth on it. The new Premier Fusion blade that Freud has, the teeth are ground in 3 different places, so it makes for nice smooth edges when you run the piece of wood through. There's less tear out, and then it's less effort to actually push the workpiece through the saw blade itself, which overall will make it more safe. And it's a thin kerf blade, so when you spend your hard-earned money at the lumber store, you turn less of it into sawdust with every pass, which is another big plus to this blade. Alright, and what I'm doing now is just ripping the hard maple and the padauk into strips that are going to be 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 wide. As you can see, they're laying out now. The board is going to finish at 1.5 inches, but I'm going to glue it up at 1 3/4 to give it some room to go through the planer and for me to sand it down. And it's going to be 9 inches long, so I'm going to cut them just a hair over to leave me some room to trim it up after. The next part of this is going to be the layout, so you want to make sure you get the pieces facing the right way and get everything set up so you're all ready to glue, because on a hot day like it was when I did this, the glue will kind of start setting up and get kind of tacky, so you want to have everything ready to go as soon as you put that glue out. Once you get them all laid out, I put them on the clamps, and I put a little bit of paste wax on the actual clamps themselves so that when the glue dries, the board will come off a lot easier and won't be stuck to the clamps. But here it is getting clamped up. I put 2 clamps to clamp it together, and then I will put 4 clamps on the front of it, clamping the work pieces down to the actual clamps themselves, so that it should be nice and flat when it comes onto the clamps and it's all dry. Again, with these little pieces of wood that are holding the workpiece down, I've just put a little bit of paste wax on those as well, so that once it's dry they'll just fall right off, and you won't have to try and beat them off there with a hammer and a chisel. And then after about 24 hours of drying, it's all set and ready to be run through the planer and cleaned up. Alright, so now that the chopping block is all planed down and it's smooth, what I did is I went in here and I marked the 4 sides of the board a mark that's 3/8 of an inch in. The reason for that is the bit I'm going to be using to put the juice groove on is a Freud round nose bit. It's a 1/2 inch radius across or diameter across from tip to tip. And it's carbide, which you really want to have with this because it's going to be nice. It's going to cut really good, and it's not going to burn quite as easy. But the bushing that I have from the edge of the bushing to the center of this tip is 5/8 of an inch, and I want this, the center of the juice groove, to be 1 inch in. And so you put a mark at 3/8 of an inch. That's where the edge of my template's going to go, which you can see right here. I'm just going to line that up with each of my 4 marks on the 4 sides. Alright, so here it is all clamped up. I do this kind of in 2 phases. I've got some clamps up top. I'm basically going to do this part right in here, and then I'm going to clamp it down here, remove these clamps, and flip it all around, and do it in 2 parts. I'm sure there's better ways to do this, but you know, for all you cat lovers, I'm sorry, but there's, you know, 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and this is just how I do it. I'm sure there's other ways out there that are better and easier. I've got this piece of scrap wood here that is clamped on this end and that end that's going to keep this from moving side to side, and then I've got that piece of wood clamped to the edge of the table here, so it's snug in place there. So you don't want this to move around at all when you're routing it, because this little bit that's in the router, just the slightest move, and you're going to see that show up on the juice groove. So anyway, here we go. Obviously this is being fast forwarded here, but you get the idea. Once that groove is cut there at the bottom, you can remove the clamps at the top. I do one at a time just to keep the template from moving. I usually start with the middle one. Once that one's moved, down there you snug it up, and then you can move the other 2. You just want to try and keep that template from moving, because otherwise your juice groove, since you're routing it in 2 phases, it's not going to line up good. So just try and keep that from moving as much as you can. I should also say that I'm using a plunge base mounted to the router. It's basically being used like a fixed base one because it's plunged all the way down and locked into place for the depth that I want. You can use either. The other one's just mounted on the router table, and I don't feel like moving it all the time. But now I'm going to show you this juice groove that it's finished. With Freud's carbide tipped round nose bit, you can see it makes a nice clean cut with no burn marks on the first time. Next part, I am going to route the little handle so that I can pick the board up a little bit easier, since it is 1.5 inches thick here. You can see the juice groove here is on the top. The bit I'm going to use is this Freud industrial router bit. It's carbide tipped. It's called a Cove Bit, but basically, well, I'll show you what it looks like. That's what it'll do on the wood, the profile. And the bit itself, this is unplugged, so if anybody were to ask or want to send me a mean message anyway, it is unplugged. This is the bit itself. It's got a bushing on it, so that it'll only go in so far to the wood. And I've got it set up where I want it to be. I ran a test piece to make sure it's the depth and everything that I want it to be. The board here, from one end to one end, is 9 inches. I want this handle to just be 7 inches long, so it'll leave about 1 inch on each side there of the board. You don't have to do this on the router table. I just like to. I think it's easier, and everything's held down nice in place. What I'm going to do is just slide the board in with this support piece here. Once it hits that bushing, it won't let me go any further, and then I'll just slide the board along until it hits the stopping block, and then I'll pull it out of there. Alright, before I show you this next part, I'm putting the round over around the edge here. It's going to be a 1/4 inch round over bit that I'm going to use. I just want to talk about the bit for a second. This is it right here. This is the Freud Quadra Cut 1/4 inch round over bit with a 1/2 inch shank, and I'm going to route it on my router table, so that's just the way I do mine, so I don't have to worry about clamping anything. I can just do it all by hand. Anyway, it's called the Quadra Cut. Obviously, you can see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 cutters on it. It's carbide tipped, and of all the bits, round over bits I've used, this is by far the best. If you want to save yourself a lot of trouble and headache, spend a little bit more and get a nicer router bit, because you're going to spend a whole lot less time sanding, chip out of wood, or burn marks, all those other things. This bit right here is worth its weight in gold, I think, which it is a pretty heavy bit with that 1/2 inch shank and the four carbide tips on there, but it cuts fast, it cuts smooth, and it doesn't leave burn marks, and I am very pleased with it. So I'm going to mount that with the router on the table there, and we'll get cracking away here. Now this part is being sped up to about 4 times the normal speed, just so this video isn't 4 hours long. But as you're doing this, just be careful when you get to the part where the handle is. Just route the little piece of wood that's sticking out. You don't have to actually go into where the handle is itself. And here's the finished product. You can see it's got the 1/4 inch round over along the whole edge. There's no burn marks anywhere on the board, even on the maple, which I used to have the hardest time trying to route without burning. It's got the handle there with the Cove Bit, and then obviously the juice groove on top. So that's the finished product. All that's left really to do is just put some mineral oil on it, while sand it down a little bit more to about 220, then put some mineral oil on it, or food safe varnish, whatever you choose to do, but it's ready to go, ready to be used or sold. I do thank you for watching my video. I hope that you were able to learn something, whether it was a new way to do something, or learning how to route a juice groove or a handle for the first time. If you have any questions or comments, you can just leave them in the comments box below. Also, like my Facebook page and check out the other things I have for sale on Etsy. Just search for Westcott Woodworks, both Facebook and Etsy. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks again for watching.